In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
On this Sunday, midway through the month of June, we are at Trinity Sunday, a day in the church calendar set aside to honor and lift up the doctrine as we believers in the church holds of the Trinity. The idea of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, of Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer, to be understood in these three roles, yet one God, bound together. It could be a day of intricate understanding of this doctrine, but today I would rather point to what Jesus is trying to tell us in this gospel, what this mystery of the Trinity is all about, and that is relationship. We have before us not just a theological puzzle, but Jesus' own mysterious attempts, as they might seem to us and to his disciples at the time, to understand this relationship, his relationship to the Father, and especially then to the Holy Spirit. Last week I introduced you to this unique word that John's Gospel uses here in this passage and in last week's passage from chapter 14 of this Gospel of John, describing the Holy Spirit as advocate, comforter, counselor, or the Greek word paraclete. As we work to unpack this gospel this week at our Bible study on Thursday, one of those comparisons about this rang so true. I have to share it with you. Jesus is explaining to his disciples in this passage everything he can. But as he says, and it's in here, I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. But the Spirit, that is the Paraclete, will declare to you the things that are to come. This Paraclete is a stand-in for Jesus when he is gone, to still be God's presence for them and us after he has left us, to truly stand in Jesus' place, represent him fully, even if he is not present anymore. How can we understand that? One of the insights is this word, paraclete, which only John's gospel brings to the table. It is that of one of lawyer, advocate, counselor. If we are ill, if something else has happened and we cannot appear in court when called by a judge or by an authority, it is agreed, it is understood by all, that a lawyer can fully represent us at times like that when we cannot be present. Think about it. As much as we trust and depend on the skills of doctors and other professionals, it is only this role of lawyer that can, with proper consultation, fully represent us, truly take our place in a court of law. That is what Jesus and the writer of John's Gospels were trying to get across to us, that this Holy Spirit, this Paraclete, is one such representative of Jesus here on earth. Even with Jesus absent, Jesus has told us, convinced us and his followers of his oneness with the Father. Now, in these words, with very little time, he is speaking through this gospel today and last week of how the Holy Spirit finishes this connection and represents him and God fully, even after his resurrection as ascension. Sometimes we forget that throughout this Gospel of John and the other Gospels, Jesus communicates in such a way as to point people to God. That is his mission. And we will see it even more clearly in word and deed as we begin our trek through Luke's Gospel next week. In our Gospel today, Jesus assures us that the Holy Spirit will communicate in such a way to point people to Jesus. That will be this Paraclete's role in the future for those who follow Christ. Unselfishness is also an important, sometimes neglected characteristic of this Holy Trinity that we try to understand. We focus perhaps too much on the overriding power of God with the term omni, meaning powerful in every way, as we think of the Trinity. Omniconscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, all-knowing, all-powerful, always One of the insights that this Trinity of the Godhood can give us for our own lives is the way they work together, sharing power, sharing authority, and using giftedness for the good of the whole church. The hymn following this sermon portrays this interplay of the three as a dance, as a way of describing this kind of unselfish intertwining. Dancing is almost always an interaction with others, sometimes within a predetermined pattern in which all the parties agree. Many times, variation and joy happen outside of those patterns as trust grows, and then improvisation. Variation also becomes part of the dance, but always with interaction and cooperation with others. For us, dancing usually involves all of this with one partner, two individuals. Imagine the needed openness and cooperation when the number moves from 2 to 3. The need for work for a greater good becomes even harder, depending more on trust, more unselfishness, more cooperation with the idea of 3 in the dance. Unselfishness is a mark of the Trinity. One of the implications also that comes from Jesus' farewell teachings in this Gospel of John is wondering how the church will move forward without Jesus present. How will the disciples work with what they have taken in from Jesus these days and years they have been with him? Noted theologian and expert interpreter of the writings of John, and especially John's Gospel, Raymond Brown, says this: in what possible sense can the presence of the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit, be better than the presence of Jesus? Brown then answers his own question, of course. In the human life of Jesus, visibly at a definite time and a definite place, God's presence was uniquely in the world. And then, corporally, Jesus left this world and went to the Father. So then, the Paraclete's presence is not visible, not confined to any one time or place. Rather, the Paraclete dwells in everyone who loves Jesus and keeps his commandments. So his presence is not limited with the Paraclete's presence by time. Jesus' presence among us is not limited to a certain moment, but is felt by us now, leading and guiding the church forward with the insights of the Holy Spirit. The Paraclete thus can proclaim the teaching of Jesus to the disciples and to us in the new and changing circumstances of our lives. Through the leaving of Jesus and the coming of the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit, the teaching of the church, grounded in the Word, continues to expand and move forward to the present day, meeting the needs of all the decisions and challenges we face in our gathering together as his church. So what should we take away from all this? First, that our growth as followers of Christ, we must continue to wrestle with our own understandings of the Trinity, of the 3 in 1. It is something that we continue to grow into and learn new truths about as our faith develops in time and in experience. It is never a completed task, but a noble one, if we are to know and understand the God we follow and love. Secondly, we should learn from the unselfish interdependence of the 3 in 1, the kind of model we should have as a community, as a greater church, as a synod, even as a denomination. Instead, we tend to work so much of the time to gain the advantage of our own ideas of what we think should be and must be, rather than unselfishly working with the other, instead of learning to dance with those whom we have or we're in relationship with in creative and mutually respectful ways. Finally, we should pray daily, weekly, and fervently for the guidance of this Paraclete, of the advocate and counselor, to be in our lives, and especially in the work and life of the church as we move into the future. We find we do not live in an easy time, a clear, moral, and uncomplicated time, but one that we can only step out and move forward to with guidance, with each other, and with the Holy Spirit every step of the way. Amen.